Sorry about that. Realize I was on mute. So sorry. Welcome, everyone. I am Amy Montgomery. I'm the managing director of the Penn Institute for Urban Research, and I'm filling in for Dr. Eugénie Birch, who could not make it for the event today. However, we will have a short video from her in a little bit. But more importantly, thank you for joining us for our talk today, Powering the Slum, Exploring Alternative Forms of Energy from Informal Settlements, which is part of Energy Week, a full week of energy-focused events on Penn's campus, as well as virtual events. We're delighted to have with us today Penn IUR scholar, Dr. James Kwame Mensah, to talk about the research he did for a new policy digest supported and published by the Kleinman Center for Energy Policy. We will post a link to that report in the chat. And Dr. Eugénie Birch, who co-authored the report with James, will show a video of the two researchers in conversation at the end of James's presentation, and then we'll take questions from all of you. Dr. James Kwame Mensah is a senior lecturer in the Department of Public Administration at the University of Ghana Business School. He's also served as the Chief Local Economic Development and Resilient Advisor to the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, where he played a major role in the development of Accra's resilient strategy. His research focuses on urban resilience, sustainable development, and the development of local economies to improve the quality of life for all residents in local and rural communities. We are thrilled to have him here with us today. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the introduction. Can I go ahead to do my presentation?
Yes, James, please start your presentation. Sorry.
All right, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everywhere you are. Welcome to this presentation. I am very excited to meet you here. The topic of my presentation is Powering the Slum, Exploring Alternative Forms of Energy for Informal Settlements in Accra. I must say that this study is part of a longer study that we did 3 years ago, and this is a follow-up to that study. What comes to mind when you see public toilets, when you see informal settlements? What comes to mind when you see this kind of images? Yes, those of us in developing countries, and those of us, people who live in informal settlements, see this kind of images on daily basis. But do they have any implication in our life? So let's explore this presentation and see the implications of these things in our life. Access to energy has generated much debate in recent times. This is because energy has implications in our life. It has implication on our healthcare. It has implication on education. It has implication on gender equality, the quality of life, and economic development. As a result of this, there's been much debate about access to energy, and not only access, but clean energy. The world population is growing, and it is known that about 1 billion people live in informal settlements. This population is estimated to go up to 2 to 3 billion in the coming years. However, it is important to note that a lot of people who live in these settlements actually lack access to basic facilities, including education, sanitation, and more importantly, access to energy. They lack access to energy. And this lack of access to energy has a lot of implications on their life. That's implication on the quality of their life. It limits their economic opportunities. Lack of access to energy perpetuates inequality. And most importantly, it leads to energy poverty. However, because of the importance of energy, these residents, people who live in informal settlements, tend to adopt various strategies to be able to cope. In our first study, we found that despite the fact that they do not qualify to have access to energy, they actually use several strategies to access electricity to the extent that almost 100% of people who live in informal settlements have access to energy. And these are some of the ways, some of the strategies that they adopt to be able to access this energy, such as electricity theft. They actually connect electricity without it passing through any meter, and all available means that they use to be able to get electricity. They also connive with electricity officials so that even though they don't qualify based on the criteria and the documents that are needed to be able to access, but they connive with electricity officials to be able to access electricity. They pay higher cost to be able to access the electricity. In our first study, we found out that the connection cost for people who live in informal settlement is about 500% higher than the connection cost for people who live in formal settlement. And electricity tariffs go as higher as 60% for those who live in informal settlement because of the nature of how they connect. So for instance, there are people in informal settlements who actually use the electricity as a source of business. So once they are able to connect with the electricity officials to have access to the electricity, access to a meter, they now connect to other households and they pay them as middlemen for the electricity. All because electricity is very, very important and it has the potential to shape people's life. Therefore, they find all means to be able to access this electricity. Recently, there's a lot of talk about green and alternative sources of energy, simply because the traditional source of energy has been found to have connection with climate change and other challenges. So therefore, attention has been shifted to green and alternative sources of energy as they are very, very important in our ability to achieve the sustainable development goals. These alternative and green sources of energy includes solar power, wind power, hydropower, geothermal energy, tidal and ocean energy, biomass, and biofuels. So these alternative sources of energy are gaining importance in recent years. This diagram here shows the growing nature of renewable energy. The diagram actually tells us that Middle East and Africa is making a very significant improvement in the adoption of renewable energy. So you could see that for the past years, about 95% increase in the adoption of renewable energy happens in Middle East in Africa. And as much as 145% adoption of renewable sources of energy is happening in other parts of Asia and Oceania. The emphasis of this is that there's a shift towards the adoption of renewable energy. In terms of the mix, we find that hydropower is growing, but recently there's a sharp increase in terms of the adoption of wind energy as well as solar. So this diagram actually shows us the increase. So you could see a sharp increase in terms of the wind energy adoption. Since 2000, there have been a very sharp increase. In fact, hydropower has been part of the traditional sources of energy. If you take Ghana, for instance, earlier years of our independence and earlier years of the country, we depend more on hydropower. However, if we look at the recent energy mix, it is gradually going towards other sources. So the context of this study was conducted in Ghana. Ghana has a population of about 31 million, and 56.7% of this population live in urban areas, while 43.3% live in rural areas. Out of these people who live in urban areas, we could find that 33% of the population who live in urban areas live in slums, live in informal settlement. And Accra has the highest. The average population who live in slums or informal settlements in Ghana is about 33%, and Accra hosts about 54% of people who live in informal settlement. In terms of energy in Ghana, energy is actually supplied or produced by the Volta River Authority, which actually gives us the hydro energy, and then a number of independent power producers. Then this energy is actually transmitted by the Gridco, Ghana Grid Company. So this company transmits electricity to either the Electricity Company of Ghana or the NIDCO. Electricity Company of Ghana works in the southern part of the country, and NIDCO works in the northern part of the country. In terms of the mix, you could see that hydro constitutes about 33% of the energy mix in Ghana, and 66% is thermal energy. How, in terms of access to energy in Ghana, overall, data shows that 87% of people have access to energy in Ghana. And those who live in urban areas, about 91% of people who live in urban areas have access to electricity, whilst 50% of people who live in rural areas have access to electricity. But the good news is that about 88% of people who live in informal settlements have access to electricity, despite the challenges that they had to go through to access it, and despite the fact that they normally don't have the requirement that is needed to access. 88% of people who live in informal settlements still have access to energy. In Accra, this study concentrated in 3 informal settlements, Abobloshi, Choko, and Avenu. These are the popular and among the oldest informal settlements in Accra, and they lack access to basic services, as I mentioned, including electricity. What did we find from these places, these informal settlements? First, we found out that there's a gradual shift to the use of solar energy. So they use solar flashlights as an alternative source of energy. Some of them were provided by NGOs with the support of development partners. If you look at this clinic here was funded by the UNDP, the Japanese Ministry of Health, and Ghana Health Services. When this clinic was put up, the biggest challenge was how to connect electricity to this clinic. Because of the crowded nature of the settlement, it was very difficult to connect this facility to electricity. So they had to put this whole facility on solar. And this facility has been working perfectly to the benefit of the community members. So solar is one of the alternative sources of energy that people in these informal settlements are now adopting to be able to have access to energy. Now, in another community, Aveno, there was this public facility. This is a public toilet which was put up by a private company. Informal settlements are so crowded, they lack access to basic facilities, as I mentioned, like sanitation. So sanitation is a big issue. So this private company has actually put up this toilet facility, and it is for multi-purpose. First, people come there to take their bath because it comes with both toilet, urinal, and bath. And people also come there for toilets. Now, so this facility has installed equipment that is able to convert the toilet into biogas. So the biogas is used for two things. First, it is used to heat water in this facility. So people who come to bath in this facility, if you want to bath cold water, that's fine. If you also want to bath hot water, that's okay. So the gas that is produced from this facility is used to heat the water. Secondly, they actually generate gas from this facility. So people actually bring their cylinder from their homes to come and then buy gas. The intention of the private company is to be able to produce enough gas so that they could extend like pipelines to people's homes so that they can have direct access to the gas that will be generated from this facility. If you look at it down here, this is a privately owned house located in one of the study sites, Choco. This house is a biogas facility that is installed in this house so that all the people who live in this house, when they go to toilet in their various toilets, it actually goes to a central place which is used to generate the biogas and is fully used by the members of this household. So people in informal settlement, because of the challenges they face in order to access electricity, they are innovating and turning to alternative sources of energy so that they could have this energy for their use. We realize that this is very, very expensive. Solar panels are expensive in Ghanaian standard, especially people who live in this informal settlement. If you look at their income levels, more especially the importation of solar facilities, there are taxes on them in Ghana. So those additional taxes tend to make them very, very expensive. People in this community also do not have the necessary skills to be able to handle these facilities. For instance, in the clinic that was funded by the UNDP, the Japanese government, and the Ghana Health Service, the caretaker at the facility complains about the inability to handle the facility. Sometimes they need to call in somebody to come and help them. Another issue that was discovered was about the issues of maintenance. Maintenance has been not only expensive, but it's been difficult to maintain those things. Sometimes they don't have the skills, they don't have the expertise to be able to maintain. When there's something wrong, you need to actually wait for somebody to come from another place to come and then actually maintain the facility or put the facility in its right place for it to be used. So from these two findings, major innovations that people in these informal settlements have adopted as a way of trying to deal with the energy situation, I came to the conclusion that public toilets are very, very important because they could actually help in overcoming the energy poverty situation in especially informal settlement. Solar panels and solar sources of energy has been very, very important and could be scaled up as a way of trying to deal with energy challenges in informal settlement. But there are also challenges associated with the use of these facilities, which needs to be dealt with. Our finding also shows that it is important for people in informal settlement to get financial support from the government so that this equipment could be reduced and become affordable to them. The tariffs and the taxes on this equipment or these facilities should also be reduced so that people can actually afford to buy those things. It is also important to create awareness because we found that um, some of the residents are afraid when they hear of a gas, when they hear of these facilities, they are afraid. They actually don't know the consequences and they think that they could have some negative consequences. So it is important to raise awareness, to conduct education, to sensitize these people about the usefulness of these new facilities. And it is also important to provide training to people in this informal settlement, especially people who handle and people who take care of these facilities, so that at least basic maintenance and basic ability to keep these facilities, they will be able to do that. In a nutshell, my conclusion is that it is important that we prioritize alternative sources of energy for people in informal settlement. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, James. Fascinating and important work. So we are going to show a video of you and Dr. Birch discussing this research. It runs about 10 minutes. So what we're going to ask is that everyone during this time, if you have questions, put them in the chat. And that's how we'll kind of get ourselves prepared for a Q&A with James for the remainder of the event. But this has been such a wonderful opportunity, and we really are so grateful to the Kleinman Center for their support of this work for a few years now. Okay, so here we'll go to the video.
I don't know about other participants, but I cannot hear any voice.
We're working on that. Sorry, bear with us for a minute here. I think if we attempt maybe taking the mute off our host account, that might help. But we're trying a few things.
James, that was a terrific presentation, but let's go back and talk about the origins of this research. We started working on this more than 2 years ago, funded by the Kleinman Center, to look at, you did some interviews with families to find out about how they were dealing with electricity in the informal settlements. Could you tell us a little bit about how you went about that?
Thank you for the question. This research actually started some 3 years back. I got to learn about the energy situation in informal settlements in Accra. And therefore, we put in a proposal to the Kleinman Center for funding to be able to conduct this research. So we selected 3 main informal settlements in Accra to study about the energy situation. We actually did interviews with households, and we got to find out that they have challenges in accessing electricity due to the nature of the settlement. However, they still use all other means because of the importance of energy to them. They use all available means to be able to access the energy, to the extent that they had to pay higher to be able to connect electricity to their home. They had to pay higher for electricity tariffs. So based on this, we decided to follow up on a second study, because one of the major findings that came out from the first study was about the fact that they were experimenting and trying to see other ways that they could access cheaper and readily accessible energy. Therefore, we decided to do this second study to be able to find out what are the alternative forms of energy in this informal settlement. So basically, that is how the whole thing started from.
And so when you selected those informal settlements, how did you choose those particular ones?
So these particular ones are the oldest, and they lack the basic access to facilities, including electricity as a major one. Meanwhile, these are the oldest informal settlement in the center of the city. So I try to do a mix, the one that is closer to the sea, the one that is closer to even the city administration office, just to get a mix of them and see how all of them are dealing with the issue of access to electricity.
And even though some of them were older, one would have hoped that they would have had access to electricity, but there were barriers to that, as we found out in the first study, and many ways that people made adaptations to get that energy into electricity into their homes by buying it from their neighbors. And neighbors were able to get a hookup through various ways, which you found out, and then they would sell hookups to their neighbors, which was really very, very dangerous in terms of fire and that kind of thing. But it was sort of an informal economy, so it was important to those who were selling the electricity. So there's a whole complex series of transactions that were taking place within the informal settlement that was how they secured the electricity. So you had to understand that. And then you searched for alternative ways of dealing with finding it because of these hazards. And what did you find? What were the most exciting things that you found, and how did you find them?
So I had a key point that says that public toilets would be an alternative way to deal with energy poverty in informal settlements. Basically, when people see public toilets, they tend to see them as a place of convenience. But people in informal settlements have actually used this as an alternative way to be able to get access to electricity or energy. So this is what I found out. I went to the same three informal settlements, tried to find out the alternative ways that they are trying to access energy. So I realized that in one of the community, they put up a clinic. During the COVID, they were supported by the Japanese government to put up a clinic. So the nature of the place does not allow for access to the normal electricity, because you needed to do extension of electric poles, and this may actually be flying around people's roof. So the agreement with the community was, okay, to install a solar system. So a solar system was actually installed on the community clinic, and that is what is powering the place and is giving them access to electricity. The second community, I found something interesting. So they try to use public toilets to deal with two major problems. The first is a place to have convenience. The second was as a way of generating energy. So a private investor actually put up this facility, and this facility is actually generating, because they build this biomass system that is able to convert these toilets into energy. So the whole plan was that this will eventually be extended to the whole community for them to have access. Currently, what they are doing is to bring their cylinders, the gas cylinders, to the place to come and then get energy as to cook. They also use the energy that is generated at the facility to heat water, so that people in this settlement who do not have access to places that they can clean themselves will actually come and then use hot water to clean themselves. So this is a way that they're trying to. I also found out that households are beginning to install this biomass system as a way of using them to generate electricity for their use. So basically, these are the three main findings that I found from the community, and I thought that this is so interesting, and this could help us deal with energy poverty in informal settlements.
So you found individual experiments. Some were forced because of the way that traditional energy would be supplied and couldn't be supplied, like the clinic, and others just because a private investor thought this might be a way of solving a big problem. how do you bring these things to scale? Do you have any hope for the expansion of these experiments?
Yes, I think that these experiments are doable and they can be expanded. For instance, I am aware of the Rockefeller Foundation funding a project in another city in Kumasi as a way of building toilet facilities. So these toilet facilities that are actually providing a source of energy could be funded and developed in a larger scale so that community members will have readily and cheaper sources of energy. And this energy is renewable energy. So I think that investment in this can actually scale it up. Because if you also look at the number of people who live in these slums, these are huge numbers of people. And if they actually use that facility, it's easy to generate more energy for them. In terms of the solar, there's a lot of sun in Ghana. And I think that with little investment and with little support, it can easily be scaled up for such communities.
So let's look at the technical side of that. What do you need to know? What does a householder need to know to have and maintain solar? And are the materials on the roof strong enough to sustain the weight of solar panels and things like that?
So I found that one of the major challenges has to do with the ability to maintain and to keep those facilities, especially the solar. So people do not have the technical skills. People know less about such facilities in terms of how to maintain them, keep them. So, but the space is there, even though the buildings and the shacks in these settlements are not of the best, but the space is there to be able to mount these solar facilities. So basically, they just need to be educated on some of the positives and some of the basic skills that they need to be able to keep this infrastructure. And I also indicated that solar, there are tariffs on solar in Ghana, and that is one of the factors that is discouraging importation of these facilities and making them very, very expensive in the country. So if the government could at least reduce or even completely remove all the tariffs on these solar systems, it will encourage them to be able to use them.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. And so there are systemic reforms that are needed to be able to enhance the use of these two technologies that you've discovered, the one on the biogas and the one on solar. But they're basically inexpensive and could be proliferated if the systematic issues were dealt with.
Exactly. So they need to actually engage. And I think that we can actually start this from the local administration because they are closer to these settlements, and they should be able to take up the mandate of engaging them and showing them and the importance of such facilities so that we can actually become part of the energy mix that they use.
Well, hopefully, James, the work that you've done will have an impact on local authorities as well as the people who are living in these informal settlements so that you can raise the quality of life for them. Thank you very much for discovering these things.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, James, for having that conversation with Eugénie. And of course, we're missing her here today. We've got some wonderful questions coming up in both the chat and the Q&A. And James, I'm going to do you the favor of just reading them to you in the order that we're receiving them. And we've got 20 minutes here, so I think we'll be able to get through them. JJ says, I work in solar energy installation during my summers and plan to continue for a small local company. Are there straightforward ways to help informal settlements from this position? Would providing education on installing these systems with local community members help? What would be the most sustainable assistance method as a person with technical skills, but not a government corporation's ability to provide funding?
Oh, this is a big one. I think that people in these settlements are ready to accept this solar system. The biggest challenge has to do with their ability to afford, especially people in informal settlements. Majority of them do not have that level of income to be able to. JJ, I will encourage you to actually look for funding from other philanthropic organizations and development partners who are interested in supporting people in informal settlement and who are people who are interested in dealing with energy situation in informal settlement or for poor people so that you can experiment your interventions in these settlements.
Great. Asuntoyan asks or says, this is a close but similar challenge for other African nations, but you've talked about how green energy may be costly in affordability and maintenance. At the end of this presentation, I'd like to know how or what measures can be adopted to create a solution or more to the much identified challenges in Africa in the course of your research? And what is the future of green energy impacts to Africa and the society at large?
Thank you for this question. I think that the expensive nature of this, especially solar, has to do with first the fact that the people in informal settlement do not have enough money because of their level of income, so they may see that as an expensive. Secondly, because of the tariffs on such equipment. Normally in developing countries like Ghana, government gets most of its revenue from taxing people who import goods into the country. So government tends to in somehow use import duties as a way of raising revenue. But I think that to deal with this situation, we must continue to innovate and come out with cheaper solar panels or cheaper equipment that are a bit affordable for this kind of people who live in informal settlement, and also try to engage government to be able to reduce or eliminate taxes on this equipment. In terms of the future of solar energy in Africa, I think that the potential is so big because there's a lot of sun in Africa. So the whole thing has to do with the ability to innovate and come out with cheaper solar systems that the people can afford so that it can be adopted in a large scale.
Beatrice asks, are there any safety precautions considered in the adoption of biomass, looking at the crowded nature of informal settlements in Accra?
Thank you, Beatrice, for this question. I think this is one of the questions why some of the people in these informal settlements are afraid about these systems. They think about the negative consequences and the safety issues about these systems. So for now, I actually did not find out about safety measures that have been put in place in these two facilities that I actually studied. So it will actually be a good for me to go and follow up to find out about what are the safety precautions, what are the safety systems that they're putting in place once they begin to adopt these alternative sources of energy.
Tabo asks, thanks you for sharing your insights, and says, you've mentioned that a private investor put up a facility leveraging renewable energy in one of the communities you studied. Given the financial barriers to scaling, can you speak to any incentives or government support in encouraging more private investment?
Thank you for this question. I think that for now, I know the government of Ghana has energy policy that talks about how they want to diversify into other sources of energy, especially green energy and renewable energy. However, there has not been much incentive in place to actually motivate people to go into that direction. I know other countries have incentives and motivations put in place for people to actually go into renewable and alternative sources of energy, but that's not actually the case in Ghana for now, even though there's a policy that tries to encourage, but tariffs are still on. And I know people who import this equipment actually complain about the fact that government still tax them.
On the topic of tariffs, JJ had a follow-up question, which is just what is behind the tariffs? What's causing them? Are there utilities or other parties that gain from the tariffs?
Yes, I mentioned earlier on that in developing countries, and especially a country like Africa, a lot of government revenue comes from imports, duties, importation duties. So whatever you import into the country, the government actually taxes you to be able to raise revenue for the development of the country. So greatly, a lot of the benefits goes to government in terms of raising money from people who import. So that is where it's coming from. And you know that most of these equipment are also not produced in Ghana. So when you import them, you have to ship them. All these costs pile up so that the prices of these facilities actually go high in this country.
Laureen asks, has consideration been given to community solar versus solar on individual properties?
Yes, so I think that individual solar, looking at the context of this study, informal settlements, may be a bit expensive for them. Community solar may be a preferable option because with contribution from community members, they will be able to mount community solar rather than individual people having solar. That is why in the field, you could actually see that the major one is the one that is funded by the Japanese government and the UNDP. Rather, you could see that they feel like the biomass with little equipment, they could actually go into the biomass. So in terms of the solar, individual household are rather using flashlights, solar lanterns, those small ones. The ability to afford panels for their house is becoming a challenge. So if they go community solar system, I think putting their resources together, they can actually, that can actually be a feasible option than individual trying to mount solar panels on their buildings.
Cecilia asks if the Ghana government is getting involved and helping, and if so, maybe you can tell us more about that.
Can you say that again?
Is the Ghana government involved? Are they helping? Is there anything to share with us about the role of the national government?
So I mentioned earlier on that the government has actually a policy on energy and talking about the fact that the emphasis is going to be on renewable energy. However, in practice, the incentives and the motivations are not forthcoming for now. But there's a policy that tries to encourage this.
Mohammed asks, it seems there is potential here to get many communities off the national grid, especially given the current energy crisis in Ghana. Have you shared your findings with the national government or local government?
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for asking this question. So for now, I have not officially shared this second policy brief with any government authority. I shared the first one with PURC. I have some colleagues at PURC. So I shared the first one that talks about how people access electricity in informal settlement. But this second policy, which talks about alternative sources of energy in informal settlement, I've not shared it. But I think that it is very good to share with them. Currently, we are having energy crisis. And in the policy brief, you will see a term that we call doomsaw when the light actually goes off. So we call that doomsaw in the local parlance. That is what we're experiencing now. And I think that it is important to bring this to the attention of government so that they could also see what they can do to support in the way of dealing with the energy crisis that the country is experiencing.
Sylvanus says, is it great that informal settlers are finding innovative ways to have access to renewable energy, such as biogas and solar? My question is, do we expect that these settlements will continue to remain informal? We know that these areas are also susceptible to hazards such as flooding and health and safety issues. What is the future of these settlements, and what is the plan of the AMA to make them sustainable?
Wow, this question is so loaded. So the issue of the sustainability of these informal settlements is a long and something that has been dragging. So yes, there are challenges in these informal settlements, such as fire, such as flooding, and so on and so on. But for now, it appears that they have been very resilient to these things. They do happen, but they have been very resilient to these things. And to think of anybody able to maybe to move these people from this settlement is going to be difficult. For instance, if you take Choco, Choco is an indigenous informal settlement where the people have lived for a number of years. It has become like their homes. So I don't see any way that they can be actually removed from that place. So what I know is that organizations, NGOs, other development partners are helping to upgrade the infrastructure that they have, basic sanitation facilities to provide. So it's a kind of institute, kind of upgrading rather than saying that you want to push them out. So I think that it's part of the arrangement to upgrade those settlements. So the ability to also provide this alternative source of energy, the ability to innovate this is a way of trying to also upgrade this settlement, just as they are trying to provide basic infrastructure, basic sanitation facilities. So for now, I don't have any cause to say that within a short period, they may change, the situation may change for it to be a formal settlement. I may not have answer to this.
We have one more question. It also comes from Sylvanus. So if anybody here has additional questions, now would be the time to drop them in the Q&A. And as we're just approaching the end, but here is one last, a kind of broader question outside of the scope of your research, but something you might have insights on. Sylvanus asks if you have any insights about the future of hydropower in Ghana, given that climate change is causing a rise in rainfall, which will force the spillage of the dam to become more frequent. Is there any plan to make it more sustainable?
Yes, not too long ago, we had this issue in Ghana. The major dam that we had in Ghana, they had to actually spill the water, and it causes a lot of damage in the communities. For now, we have two main hydro power dams in Ghana, one in southern Ghana and one in somewhere middle northern Ghana. Currently, I am not aware of any future plans to do another hydro in the country. I think that the emphasis is even moving towards more of solar, because even if you look at the hydropower in the northern part of the country, middle northern part of the country, they have actually installed a lot of solar panel on that facility. The government has installed a lot of solar panel on that facility. So I think that the emphasis is moving more towards renewable sources of energy such as solar, even though the potential is so huge for hydropower in Ghana. I have not done a comparative analysis to know which of them is expensive, whether to dam and do a hydro and to install solar panels in large scale. I have not done that comparison, neither have I read it to be able to know whether the government will go solar or the gas, but for now, I have no hint of any attempt to do another hydropower in Ghana.
Well, thank you so much, James, for spending. Oh, we have one more. And since we have a couple minutes here, let's the question is, I'm curious, the residents in the informal settlement of Ghana are often migrants from other, or are, sorry, it's a question. Are the residents of informal settlements in Ghana often migrants from other regions or indigenous communities? And would the population in those informal settlements frequently move in and out? So just a question about who's making up the informal settlements. Is it people migrating for different reasons? And are the populations within the informal settlements long-term or transitory?
Thank you so much for this question. So I studied 3 informal settlements. The Choko is an indigenous informal settlement, and that place is it's an indigenous Ga people. So there's no people migrating in and out of that community. So if you take the second informal settlement, which is Aveno, it's also an indigenous settlement which does not have a lot of people migrating in and migrating out. The third one, which is Agoglushi, that's settlement tend to have more, or it tends to be more of migrants coming in and leaving, but it has become like a major hub where a lot of people who come to find work to do in Accra, especially those who don't have places to stay, actually come there to stay. People come there, a lot of businesses around that place. So it's not only like a place for people living. That slum is like what we call the economics of slum. So it's like a business with a lot of interest. Those who are selling, those who are giving out accommodations, those who are, so a lot of business happening around that slum. So even though in the third slum, which is Agoglushi, people may go in and come back, but there's even, it keeps growing in number. It keeps growing in number. So the future of these places appears to be like the population will continue to be there. The population will continue to be there. And I think that if there's a way we could help upgrade facilities there, that will be better than, because it's not easy to move people out of these settlements because of the interest in there.
Well, thank you, James, so much for sharing your expertise and your experience in studying the communities and the solutions, the potential solutions to help making them sustainable and places that can thrive in the future, as we're seeing that they are serving a great need for a great number of people. And thank you all of our participants for joining us and for the really wonderful questions. I'd just like to point out that remind you all that this event is part of Penn's Energy Week. There are more great programs across campus, some virtual as well. And we encourage you to check out the Energy Week website for more information about those events, which is energyweek.upenn.edu. And we will put that link in the chat for you. And so everyone, thanks again. And we'll be posting the video of this, so you'll be able to revisit it and share it with other people in your networks. And James is a scholar of Penn IURs and a person we'll be continuing to do a lot of work with over the years. And we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy, for having me. And thank you all our participants. See you again next time.
See you soon. Thanks, everyone.